Do you ever get so overwhelmed by how many paintbrushes there are to choose from? Well, today I'm going to show you my 5 favourite brushes and what they can be used for and how they can make painting a lot easier. Coming up. Hi again there guys, Emma here from Paint and Pinot, giving you some top tips for all things art and design. And today we're going to look specifically at paintbrushes. Paintbrushes are overwhelming to many people because there's so many choices. So today I'm going to break them down into the 5 basic paintbrushes that I use to produce pretty much every single painting that I've ever done. So the idea with today's video is that we're going to go through each paintbrush step by step, show you what they're used for and how they can make your painting an awful lot easier. And if you hold on to the end of the video, I'm going to give you a special top tip for one trick that's really going to help you maintain your brushes for life. So here's the 5 brushes that I use on a day-to-day basis. They range obviously from the particularly small to the particularly large. So the first one I'm going to talk you through is the smallest one I use. This is what we call a round head brush. Now this is a small brush. It's actually only a size 4. They do go down to 0. The reason I choose this is you can actually get a really good range of fine detail lines, which is why I mainly use this. So when I'm doing that foreground, this is the type of brush I'm going to be using. Or if you're looking at doing tree branches, this is particularly good. It's all about technique. So when I load this up, I try and get a really nice flat straight line so that you've got one side of your brush loaded. And that gives you that sharp edge so that you can do some really lovely fine detail lines. The second brush I'm going to show you today is what we call a fan brush. These are amazing little things, particularly if you're doing lots of trees or grasses or hair painting, because you get that really lovely edge that you can't necessarily get as easily with a normal brush. So the way these work is you're simply going to load them up with your pigment. And then just with a simple basic twist of the wrist, we can produce this really awesome looking tree. They're particularly good, I find, for pine trees, doing that lovely foliage detail. One of the other really great techniques used in the actual fan brush is to produce grass or hair or that really lovely fine detail. So you're just literally going to take up the paint and you're just flicking up to get that lovely detail. It would be so much harder to do this with an individual brush. The fan brush makes it incredibly simple. Brush number 3. This is a flat-headed brush. These are fantastic for doing those really straight lines. This is a little bit bigger now, so we've actually gone on to a size 8. You need to be careful with sizes because you can get 2 different types of size 8s, believe it or not. So I'll give you an example. These here are both size 8 brushes, believe it or not, but obviously they are totally different in size. So it's really important that you make sure that if you're going to buy a brush online, you're familiar with the actual brand of brushes. You'll notice that I have lots of different types of brands going on here. I don't particularly stick to one brand. If you did want a name of a brand, then I am not sponsored by this company, but I tend to trust in East Art. They're really good for basic beginner brushes and they're really good quality as well. So with the flat-headed brush, I've actually personalised this. You can see how I've cut it on an angle. This is to enable me to do some one-stroke techniques. One-stroke technique is an amazing technique which just makes making flowers, leaves, foliage so much more simple. You can literally do it in one stroke, hence why it's called a one-stroke technique. So you can see here where I'm loading up the brush. The trick is to have 2 sides of the brush loaded with opposing colours. Then when you're mixing it, I tend to put a little floating medium, so that just enables you to actually blend the paint through much more easily. And then you can produce lovely effects like this. Brush number 4, this is just a basic round-headed brush. So again, this is another size 8 brush, a little bit larger this time compared to the fine detail brush you saw earlier. This is quite a rough head. We are using acrylic paint, so you really don't have to spend a lot of money on brushes. If you're doing watercolour, it's different because they've got to be able to maintain the water. But with acrylic paint, you can really get away with more of the cheaper range. So I don't worry so much about spending lots and lots of money on brushes. You just want to make sure they've got a nice flexibility and that they will actually flex back. So if you go to a shop, all you need to do is just simply check the brush, that it's going to flex back quite fast. So this here is quite a rough bristled brush, and I have that specifically so that I can do a dry brush technique. Dry brush technique is where you're simply loading up your brush with a minimal amount of pigment so that you can then again get that beautiful foliage effect, or any sort of texture that you want to have in your painting, you can use a dry brush technique for. And then brush number 5, well, this is my big boy. This here is unofficially an artist brush. It's a 100mm painter's brush, the largest brush that I could find in my hardware store. It was $5, dirt cheap. You're probably going to spend about $25 if you bought an equivalent with an artist brush, and you can get the most fantastic techniques out of this. So basic technique is just great for priming your canvas. So whenever you do a painting, you've got to prime up your canvas to start with. But these are also amazing for doing blending techniques. So if you want to blend in like a sunset effect, these are amazing for that, especially if you tape a few of them together, then you can really start to load up your canvas and do whole blends in one go. There is a couple of videos that I've done using this brush where you can quite simply produce paintings in a minute because of the way that they're so simple to use. So if you haven't used one of these before for painting, give it a go because they're a lot of fun and they just make blending so much easier. All right, if you stayed to the end of the video, you're going to get this one last tip, one of the best tips I was ever given when I was younger in terms of how to clean your brushes. So basic sanitizing hand gel, believe it or not, if you just put a tiny little blob onto the page, you can get rid of any little bits of pigment that get stuck into those nuts and crannies of the brush. Just make sure that you wash your brush thoroughly at the end. Question of the day, what is your favorite brush to use? What is the go-to brush that you rely on? Please leave a comment below, guys. I'd love to hear from you. If you have enjoyed today's video, then please hit that like button as it really does help our channel. And if you'd like to see some more weekly top tips just like this one, then hit that subscription button just below. Alrighty guys, we'll see you next time. Happy painting.